Welcome back. If you joined us for part one, I'm so glad you're here for part two. And if you're just jumping in, you may want to go back and start there. Either way, let's dive in. So, one thing I love about your work is that it's not just about making money, although that is a very silver lining, but it's about how money moves through communities. And this is so important right now, especially we as communities need to come together, just like you said, go across the street, talk to your neighbor. How does community-based lending change the relationship people have with wealth and with ownership?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of it's like we look back on history and we judge it often, right? We're like, oh, I can't believe they didn't notice they were doing that. They're just
Right?
spilling
How did they
oil
do
into the.
that?
Why did they do that? Whatever it is, slavery or the way that we've extracted oil and we didn't even have any best practices and all the seals got hurt and all the things, right? We judge our past so easily. But I often wonder if one of the things we'll judge in about 10, 15 years, if I'm good at what I'm doing, is the fact that we send about $400 billion a year from American households in the form of mortgage interest out of our communities. We send hundreds, if not thousands of dollars from every household, whether you are a renter or you're an owner, out of your budget to Wall Street without a thought, as if it's just completely normal that the majority of our income all goes to the same place. And we're like, yeah, never thought about that.
Well, and I
What
feel like
if?
we all think like that's the only way to do it. And
Yeah,
that's why this is so important that you're on because
yeah.
I feel like so many people, it's just like, there's like, people think, oh, there's just one path to success. There's one path. I graduate, I go to college, I get this degree, I do this job, and then I buy a house, and then I have a family, and it's like, dur, dur, dur. And that's total bullshit. Like
Yeah,
the path to success looks like this, first of all.
yeah, yeah.
And for those listening, I'm moving my finger through the air in a scattered way. But I mean, the reality is there is not just one way. And I think that so many people don't know about what you're talking about. And so they just sign up. They're like, dude, I want a house. I want to live in a place. I want to own my own home. I don't want to rent. And so now I got to do what we do. I got to go to, the bank and get a loan and holy shit, my credit's crap. Now what do I do? Now I got
Hmm.
to do some really weird monkey dance for my credit to be over 600 because it makes no sense. I paid this off and it went down. I don't know what's happening. So I think, that's like such a huge point that you're making of just like there is not just one way. There are many ways, and that changes the community when they figure it out. Who wants to send their
Yeah,
money
and
somewhere else? We want it in our communities.
yeah, exactly. It's like, why send it to Wall Street when you can send it to your neighbor across the street? And that, I think, what we fail to like pay attention to, I think in Western culture in general, is sort of the ecology of things, how things are related to each other, the flow of money. In other words, we're thinking about how much money we make, but we're not thinking about where does the money come from and where does it go, and how does that impact our system, our communities. And when you think about, real estate, the majority of the money is flowing in one direction, which is out of our communities up to institutions, hedge funds, billionaires ultimately. And what we could do is just change the direction of that flow of money and take real ownership of where are our mortgage payments going and how do we develop a system where we're exchanging money together versus all having this extractive sort of sump pump economic model where the banks are extracting from us without us ever even thinking about it.
I just love this so much. And I think right now the climate of the US specifically, but just in general, is so ready for this information. They're so ready. They're looking for new ways to do things. They're looking for new ways to support their communities and you know, not just my neighbor, like I'm gonna help my neighbor, but like our community, our what's going on in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Um, people often believe that wealth or ownership is for other people. And I think that's really common, kind of like if you look back at your story before your father passed away, you're just like, like you're blue collar, we do this, we work hard, and then hopefully we have a pension. That's
Hmm.
a lot, that's the way it used to be back in the day. But do you think that unconscious belief that wealth or ownership is for other people, do you think that is actually true, that people often think that? And if so, how do we start breaking that mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, 90% of what I'm teaching my students in my coaching program is how to overcome these limiting beliefs and this subconscious social conditioning that keeps us generationally locked in poverty. And for me, that had all sorts of things about my identity. I had beliefs that money would make me bad. I had beliefs that, a good girl wouldn't chase money, wouldn't prioritize those things. And so from all sorts of parts of my identity, I was told by society that I shouldn't have a lot of money. And how I started to get through that was, first, I started to love myself. I started to truly authentically lean into who I am and my authenticity as a queer person, and then as a person who's non binary or trans. And those moments of self acceptance broke me out of the social conditioning in these other arenas, which allowed me to sort of parlay into the financial arena as well and say, well, I know that social conditioning says I shouldn't have these things, but it also says I shouldn't be gay, and I got through that. So let me see what it looks like to be a woman with wealth. And let me see what it looks like to be a queer icon who teaches people about financial literacy. Let me break the bounds of these ceilings our society says we should have. And in doing so, maybe I'll help fragment the belief system of other people so they can also have an imagination for themselves. And so I think we start to break that, one, by surrounding ourselves with either content or people who embody the life that we want, who we can see ourselves in. So whether that be in a community, whether it be going to a real estate investor network where you do align with their values, or putting yourself in a setting where you go, oh, I didn't know that was possible. And by seeing that spark of imagination, it's like the man who broke the world record for the mile, right? They said, oh, you can never do that under 5 minutes. And then once he did, it was like everybody started breaking that. And it's the same thing. We learn by the modeling of other people. And so by surrounding ourselves with people who have different ideas, which are threatening to us, right? I was very threatened to go to a real estate investor meetup. Oh, those savage, like awful people who are going to just try to take advantage and, capitalist pigs. Like, you know what I mean? Like that was
They're going
my
to try to sell me a
mindset.
house.
Yeah, they're gonna try to like steal from an old woman her equity, and there are those people, don't get me wrong, but there are bad people in every industry. So if you walk in and you think, oh, those people, as soon as your brain says those people, I would get curious. I get real curious, because it's probably the social conditioning that is telling you to dissociate from anybody who has wealth because you're afraid of having it yourself. And if you walk, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, just like that those mental, it's like it is a conscious pruning of your mind, of growing curiosity in places that you thought were fundamentally just true. So fundamentally, I just think people who chase after money are bad people. That thought I had to question first to break it and go, actually, what if those things are things you can have at the same time? What if you could provide so much value in the world that people would want to give you money because you changed their life? That wouldn't make me a bad person. That would make me an extraordinarily good person, in my book at least. And so changing that narrative unlocks the unconscious patterns that keep us stuck. And you start to reimagine who you are, what is possible for your life, and you surround yourself with people modeling that, and suddenly through osmosis you develop a very different way of being, and that produces new results in your life.
And this is so true of everything in life.
Everything.
I feel like the minute that we start saying those people, that's when we need to
Hmm.
check ourselves, just like you
Yes.
said, because we can all learn so much from each other.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's super painful. Like, let me just say that out loud. It's going to be painful sometimes, because you're going to be dealing with people that are dicks sometimes, that are
Yeah.
not open to what you're saying.
Yeah.
But gosh, what if we could change what they think and how they feel, by just opening their mind to something new? It's like, if we can grit through the tough, uncomfortable conversations and pieces, then it's not just about money, but just about all the things. I scribbled down queer icon. I think you need a t-shirt. And I think you are. But I could not agree with you more about this in life and in wealth. The other thing that I find super interesting, that I don't think people talk about a lot, that you've said a couple times, is that you felt like, as somebody from low or middle income, let's just throw that all into a one lump there, that you had these preconceived notions about people with money were bad, or if they were, like, and what I think is might surprise some of the listeners, it's probably split 50-50. There's probably 50% of the people are like, yep, I get it. Totally agree. Totally thought that or totally think that. I don't know. And then the other half is like, oh my gosh, what do you mean we're
Yeah.
bad? Like, what are you talking about? So like the connecting of the dots on that one is
Mhm.
probably like really hard for some people there because they're like, what are you talking about? Like, how could it be bad? You have money. And I think that is such an important point out of this conversation is that we need to bring those two
Yes.
things together um in a way that makes sense for everybody because it would be amazing. What if all of those middle and low income folks that we were lumping into that, what if they all had money? That'd be freaking
Mhm.
amazing, right? Because then they wouldn't be
Yeah.
stressed and they wouldn't struggle.
Yeah.
There's still life stress. There's still
Yeah.
but it does make things easier. Like,
Yes.
quite frankly, like, they always say money can't buy you happiness. But it is a lot more comfortable when you can pay your
Yes.
bills and you can eat food. These things are just like
Yes.
basic concepts, right?
Yeah.
So I love that you said that. A lot of people we get so stuck. Part of what It's Not That Serious is about is just supporting each other and helping each other get unstuck. And a lot of people have a fear, and so a lot of times they get stuck in something they hate or they're just
Hmm.
don't want because they're too scared of what might be on the other side. And it's like I often quote the "but what if you fly," that concept of like, but what if it's like, the most amazing thing? And some people will just sit in the bad part because it's too scary of the fear of what's on the other side. So, with that thought in mind, a lot of people stay stuck because they're afraid of making the wrong financial decisions. So, how do you personally think about risk now? And are there tricks that you recommend for others to get unstuck or get out of that place?
Yeah, I think risk is often misperceived. People think that it's risky to buy an asset like a duplex or a triplex, and that that's really scary, and that things might go wrong. Like that's sort of the common person's thought process. But what they fail to recognize is that by clocking in and going to their W-2 job, working for somebody else's business, they're building an asset that doesn't belong to them, and they are fundamentally losing every single day. And the risk that they're taking is their life. Like they're losing those hours that they'll never get back. And so because they're so afraid to take the risk to learn how to grow assets, they just trade their life to somebody else because they're fearful of learning and developing their own financial literacy. And so it's just like a misappropriation of risk. The risk is, which is worse? I lose $100,000 or I lose 40 years of my life. It's an easy,
Boom.
it's boom. Like, obviously, I would rather lose $100,000 learning how to become a good real estate investor by cutting my teeth in the trenches and making a mistake here and there so that I develop the financial literacy that I could have the majority of my life back once I mastered this system, which is how to build assets that make money while I sleep, right? It's worth the education of $100,000 risk. But most people are too afraid to do that because they perceive that failure is on one continuum and on the other end is success, and they're somewhere in the middle, and so they're always running from failure to get to success. But what actually is happening is you have to start right here on the continuum. That's you, and to get to success you have to go through failure. In fact, you have to fail multiple times on a repeated in a repeated way until you discover what works. And it's because people are afraid of failure, they never develop the skills necessary to succeed. And so once you learn to, so my way of getting unstuck is to change your relationship with failure and to embrace it. So for example, in order to become very good at finding off-market properties, I had to cold call 10 hours a week, and I had to learn how to talk to people from square one. They think I'm a creditor calling them about their credit card, to getting them to say, yes, come over and have dinner with me tonight and talk about my house that's in foreclosure, right? That is a skill that took hours, weeks, months. But when I mastered that skill after thousands of rejections, well, now I have a skill set that I can walk a person through a very difficult circumstance and monetize it for them and me at the same time. And that is now, I helped my partners buy 16 properties the first year that I was in that trench, level job, like cold calling people in foreclosure. But most people would never even get there because they're afraid to even pick up the phone and have that first conversation because of the failure. But truthfully, the failure is why I got good. I had to fail 1,000 times to get 16 yeses, and that's the mentality you have to shape is embrace failure, lean into failure, chase failure, look for it, because that's the feedback loop you need to improve.
That's so amazing. And again, I'm just totally blown away by your tenacity because you didn't take a course where you were like, okay, I learned ABC, XYZ, and now I'm doing this. And you really like taught yourself and really cut your teeth on fucking up. Like like, hey, if this isn't gonna work, like I'm gonna mess it up and then like I just find that so amazing and impressive. And I think it says a lot about who you are, but also about what you can help teach others in your program, etc. So I'm just like, again, I'm totally blown away by that. And speaking of which, I want to give you time to really blow up what you're doing. And you're
Yeah.
building Seller Financing Academy. You're helping people rethink what's possible financially. You're, I'm sure, blowing their minds. Everybody you talk to, you're blowing my mind every 5 minutes. But what are you most focused on right now? How can people learn more about your work? How can they connect with you? Tell us all the things. And by the way, folks, it will be in the show notes. So you don't have to madly scribble all this down. Of course, listen to it 17 times on Spotify or wherever you're listening. That's fine too. But it will be in the show notes. So we will have that in the INTS network. So tell us all about how do our glorious listeners find your glorious knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, so I learned seller financing at a boot camp about 10 years ago on a weekend. And my mind was blown. I thought it was so amazing. And I went back to my community in Portland and I formed a small group of people, accountability group. And we met every single week. We talked about, talking to 100 people this week and asking them if I could buy their house. Even I have $10,000 in my checking account. How brave is that? And we kept each other accountable. We spurred each other on. And over the course of the next few years, we built our portfolios together. And I thought, that's just how it goes. But in reality, I went back to that boot camp to volunteer and I found out only about 10% of the people took action on the things they learned. And I realized that, adult learning is not on a weekend boot camp. It requires accountability. It requires some hand holding. It requires seeing other people model the behavior ahead of you so that you can just start to believe, wow, maybe I could do that. And so I've created the Seller Finance Academy so that people have a community to learn this within a context of encouragement and support and proven models. And we walk them, through the mindset of what does it take to build wealth and how do you start to value your one true precious life over anything else? How do you start to prioritize yourself and your wealth and your family before you think about what your boss wants you to do on a Thursday afternoon, right? Like, how do you prioritize yourself? And then, two, how do you have meaningful conversations with sellers across the table where you truly listen deeply and understand their problem, and then design a deal that solves their problem while also solving yours, meaning that it cash flows right away and it helps them into retirement. And then from there, like, how do you scale a portfolio? Like, how do you hire property managers? How do you hire contractors? How do you think about the metrics and the math? And how do you avoid making the big expensive mistakes that can happen in real estate? Well, you need mentorship. And so we're creating that community. We have over 240 students since last fall when we opened the doors. Really wholehearted people, building amazing things with their real estate knowledge, intentional communities. We have members helping trans folks out of red states by creating group homes. We have people building subsidized housing. There's so many beautiful things that you can do in a community like this, and you can learn from others who are already a few steps ahead of you.
That's so amazing. And I love the idea that, you've got this group of 240 folks, which means that you've spoken to thousands because like you said, there's only 10% that'll actually take action. And I think a lot of times it's just overwhelm. Like, okay, I know that I go to work and I get a paycheck and I don't have to think about it and I'm on autopilot. Da, 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 da. And I think sometimes when there's an extreme thing that's happening in our lives, it really catapults us to take action. And so hopefully some of the people listening won't require a catastrophic event to want to take action and want to. I actually want you to adopt me if that would be okay. I know it's not common to adopt folks that are older than you, but
Yeah.
I need you to adopt me, teach me all your knowledge. No, this is like, I think it's so fabulous. Again, it'll be in the show notes so everybody can learn where. And Mel, give us your website. I know you have a website.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can go to sellerfinanceacademy.com. I'm also on all the social medias. This idea has really gained a lot of momentum. Like in the last 8 months, I've developed over 1.2 million social media followers because, not because I'm cute, but because because this
You
idea
are
is
cute.
important. Thank
You
you.
are cute. Again, give those finance bros a run for their money.
That's right.
But, folks, if you ever get on TikTok, I'm telling you right now, if this interview didn't motivate you enough to look up Mel's stuff, you have got to see the content on TikTok. You'll be so energized. You'll be so moved. You'll be so lit up with energy for learning how to do this. And it warms my heart, the thought of regular folks just being able to do this for themselves without having to follow the strict rules that have been put in place, especially right now when we're looking at voting lines being changed. We're looking at all these crazy things happening. And I'm like, what year is it? Is
Yeah.
2026? This is nutty sauce
1926.
happening right now. But the idea that you're giving these people of myself, everybody, right? Like you're giving these people that are not in that, and I'm using air quotes here, folks, but that are not in that group of traditionally wealthy folks. This gives everybody an opportunity, and it's so freaking awesome. I'm loving it so much. Okay, fun question. You said to me casually when we were talking prior to getting on air that you can do a 360 on a wake surf. Now, that sounds very impressive. I have no idea what it is, but I would love to tell you, for you to tell us, tell the listeners, what's something outside of work that makes you feel most alive? Maybe it's 360 on a wake surf, but I feel like there's much more to that comment.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I love boating. I'm like that, like that classic real estate investor who has a boat. But really, really for me, it's that I can take my best friends out on a boat all day. We can spend 5 hours together. We can laugh. We can be kids. And when I was a kid, I skateboarded a lot. But you fall down on a skateboard when you're 30 something, you're gonna break a leg. It's hard. It's gonna hurt.
Not
But
quite
when
the
you're
same.
Yeah, not quite the same, but on a wake surf, you fall down. It's like doing a cannonball in the pool. It doesn't hurt at all, and so it's my adult version of skateboarding on behind the boat. But yeah, super fun. Kind of funny story there. I'd been trying for about 5 years to do this 360 on a wake surfboard, and I just really struggled to do it. And one day I turned TikTok on and I watched 2 videos on how to do it, and I did it right afterwards 6 times. So it's
TikTok is bringing
TikTok's
us all
powerful.
so much happiness.
Yeah, you can learn a lot on TikTok. You can learn financial literacy from me or how to do a 360, whatever.
And listen, I am so impressed when I see people wakeboarding. Have you seen the woman? She's probably got actually, I probably saw her on TikTok. That's like doing the wakeboarding in like heels, and she's like
Yes,
holding all kinds of stuff. I'm like, I'm telling you.
so
Now,
cool.
I mean, if you could do a 360 and throw on some heels, like I would be, can I, maybe could be a new trend, a new
Yeah.
TikTok trend. Okay. Closing the last question. I have had so much fun talking to you. I am so stoked and thrilled and excited for everybody to hear about what you're doing, to then go to see your content. But for in the INTS, and it's not that serious universe, every month we highlight we have a series called our WHIP series, and that's our Women in Power series, where we highlight not somebody's resume or their life story, but just something tough that they went through and how they got through it. If you haven't checked it out, people, go to the website. It's not that serious.com. Check it out. Women in Power, or our WHIP series, Women in Power, power can mean so many things. So when you hear that phrase, what does being a WHIP or a woman in power actually mean to you?
Yeah, when I hear that phrase, I immediately think of the patriarchy. I think of how women have been historically marginalized and oppressed for centuries, at least in Western culture. And part of being in power is unwriting the scripts that we've been handed, both as men and women. It's patriarchy hurts men too. It's not just women. It's a structure that hurts us both. And so when I think of women in power, I think of us rising up and not waiting for permission, not waiting for it to be handed to us, but actually taking our own power and saying, I'm going to change this system by taking actions that society has told me are impossible. And so finding our power and equaling the balances, quite literally creating financial equality by taking more.
Hello, matriarchy. No, anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. We'd go on for hours. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate not only you giving us time in our little INTS universe, but also just what you're trying to do in the world is so impressive. And it's such a fucking cool way of mixing financial independence and also your social work background and care for other people. And as I always hashtag lift as you rise, I deeply believe this and I see you doing that. I see you. You rock. You're amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody go to the website, get some gear, support women-owned businesses. Check out Mel's stuff. It's ridiculously cool. Next time, treat each other nice, would you please? Okay, see you guys. Thank you. That's a wrap on today's episode of Carrie, It's Not That Serious. If this conversation resonated, subscribe and share it with a whip, a woman in power in your life. You can find more conversations, more community, and all the fun INTS merch you love at itsnotthatserious.com. We're building something meaningful here, and I'm so glad you're a part of it. Until next time, remember, it's not that serious.